Hello everyone and welcome to the MoeGamer podcast. I'm Pete Davison and I'm not wearing any trousers because I'm on holiday. That's nice, isn't it? There's a lovely mental image to start your day off with.
I'm never wearing trousers when we record.
Fantastic. There you go. So we got a completely pantsless podcast today. Fantastic. Anyway, the voice you hear there is my regular podcasting companion and good friend Chris Kasky. So how are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing wonderful, Pete. How are you?
Excellent. I'm feeling pretty great about having 2 weeks away from the day job. Not that I hate the day job or anything like that. It's just, very dull, like most day jobs are. And that provides me lots of lovely free time to do things that I actually want to do rather than things I have to do. So
I don't think I've ever had 2 solid weeks off in my life.
No, I don't do it very often. The main reason I've got it this time is that my wife's going away for a bit in the week to go and see some of her friends from Final Fantasy 14, and I thought I might as well have some time off as well, so I can house sit and look after the cats and stuff. So, and that also frees me up with lots of time to make videos, write articles, and all sorts of things like that. So, should be nice. I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyway, so we have lots and lots of things to talk about today. Our main topic for the episode coming up in the third segment is we're going to be discussing some of our favourite RPG battle systems from over the years. Something that quite a few people have expressed an interest in hearing about at some point, and it's almost certainly something that we will come back to a few times as well, because there's lots to talk about there. But as usual, we're going to kick off with the news, and with it being quite a while since we've last met, there's quite a lot of it. There's a few things I'd like to discuss in a bit of depth, but I thought we'd just rip through some of the most prominent headlines that have caught our eyes recently. So I'm just going to start at some of the most recent stuff that we've put in our little news docket channel thing. So, first of all, this is something that you know a bit more about than me, but we've had confirmation that the Snack World's English localization is still alive and on the way. So, tell me a bit about this, because every time you mention this, I always have to look up what it is, because I forget every time.
Oh, well, so, level 5, they work kind of in broad swaths. Like, level 5 never just makes a game. They always try to launch like a multimedia empire. Like, it's always got like an anime attached and a tremendous push for toys attached. So Snack World has just kind of been their latest attempt at that. And one of the things that's really cool about it to me is it has this kind of claymation stop motion aesthetic to it, which I find really charming. There's really not much else to that. It's kind of a cute, child-friendly action RPG with some major collection elements. It doesn't look too far off from kind of Fantasy Life and Yokai Watch and all the other stuff they're famous for. But I really like their work. Some people get on them for their stuff being kind of cookie cutter, but I just find, because I'm such a fan of cartoons, and even I watch a lot of children's cartoons just as an adult to parse out the art behind them and the writing, and so to me that aesthetic is really pleasing. So I'm just always really excited for new level 5 stuff, cool. Especially because I don't care for Yokai Watch. I care for it as a property, but I don't like the games. So I've always been disappointed that for the past couple years I haven't been able to enjoy that level 5 property. But the gameplay of Snack World looks a lot closer to something that I could get behind. So
cool.
Yeah, just worth keeping an eye out for. Their stuff is always colorful and cute, and if that's what you like, because it's what I really like, then it'll be another good one to keep an eye out for. And I think the Switch version specifically is the one that's getting worked on for the West. I may be mistaken, but I don't think we're going to get the 3DS version at this point. And the Switch version is like a complete version with like all the DLC packs and extra content crammed into like a definitive version.
As it should be. Yes. All right. Okay, moving on. A quickie. Caladrius Blaze is heading to Nintendo Switch. This is a shoot-'em-up that's been around for a while. Originally developed by someone who worked on the Raiden series, and it's got nice artwork. And if I remember correctly, it has some sort of clothes ripping mechanic in it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. So like the boss characters, the character design is actually done by the same artist who did the strategy Shin Megami Tensei games, Devil Survivor. And his style is quite well regarded. So he designed all the lady characters, and there's like a clothes break mechanic when you fight the bosses. But the big thing to me is I'm excited about this because Moss makes really cool games. Raiden 4 and 5 were excellent. And with it coming to the Switch, it's great because I have one of those flip grips to play it in the Tate mode, so that'll be really cool. So hopefully, the PS4 version of Caladrius Blaze did get physical pressings both in Asia with English, and Limited Run also did it. So I'm hoping the Switch version will get a similar treatment.
Yep. Great. Okay, sounds good. I think I do have a copy of that on some platform, but it's a prime example of things getting lost in my digital library. Like, I think I own it, but I have no idea where it is.
Sure.
So, yeah, I may well just pick it up again on Switch, because, it's nice to have everything on Switch, as we know. All right, moving on. Yacht Club Games have announced that they're doing a new project. It's called Cyber Shadow, which is a NES-style game inspired by Ninja Gaiden, with a bit of Contra and a bit of Batman in there as well. So, yeah, looking really nice. This got a lovely art style. Similar kind of thing to Shovel Knight in that it's sort of kind of bearing in mind the limitations of the NES, but not necessarily limiting itself to being a completely authentic NES experience. It's just heavily inspired by that, and it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it's an example of what I like to call this kind of enhanced nostalgia, right? Like it looks like what you remember NES games looking like, but they didn't actually look like that. So it's cool.
It looks like you wish retro games looked.
Yeah, which is kind of the way Bloodstained was. Curse of the Moon was the same way. Like, there's no way the NES could have handled those bosses and those colors, but it looked so close. It looked close enough that you felt it was authentic, even though it was enhanced. What's cool about this is Yacht Club stretching their publication muscles, so they're not developing this. This is being developed by by a guy who goes by Mecha Skull, and he's a very, very delightful pixel artist that I've followed for quite some time on like Twitter and whatnot. And this is his game, and they're just kind of extending their know-how to get this to market for him. So it's cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And it really, for those of you who are like deep old school 8-bit NES side-scroller heads like me, even more so than Ninja Gaiden, it looks a lot like Natsume's Shadow of the Ninja. Like the jump mechanics and the way the attacking works is really similar to that, which is really delightful because that's one of my all-time favorite games.
Yeah. And we also have a soundtrack produced by Jake Kaufman. The actual music itself is by someone called Enrique Martin, who I can't find any details on, aside from him being either a retired Spanish footballer,
which is probably not the guy,
or the full name of Ricky Martin. Which is probably not him.
What if it was?
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's probably not him though. But anyway, so that's well worth a look. So be sure to check that out. Moving on, we've got a sequel to what was it called? Labyrinth of Refrain, Coven of Dusk, coming from Nipponichi. That has been confirmed to be coming for PS4 and Vita, interestingly enough. They originally said it was going to be coming to Switch, but that apparently was wrong. So it's just PS4 and Vita. For the Japanese version, anyway, that doesn't necessarily rule out a Switch version for the West, but the Japanese version has just been announced for PS4 and Vita.
Be very surprised if a Switch version doesn't happen. I mean, the original one was on the Switch, and I plan on getting the original one on the Switch, so I'm really hoping that happens.
Yeah, so this has been designed as a kind of a spiritual successor rather than an outright sequel, so you should be able to jump straight into this one if you want to. They've taken on board a lot of feedback from the first one. I haven't played the first one yet. It is one that I'd like to cover in detail at some point, so I've got that sort of stewing away on the shelf at the moment, but I haven't actually started it at all yet. So I know it was quite well regarded though. A lot of people I know who have played it, they really enjoyed it. So good to see more of the same but better. Have you played it at all yet?
No,
you haven't got it yet.
I really want to, though. I mean, it's really cool because, I mean, it's clear that what this game is an attempt to stretch Nipponichi's the Disgaea design philosophy to a dungeon crawler. Just like more. Like you can make all these different puppet minions and level them up like super high and alter their abilities. So I always love that about this Gaia. Just the meta game is just more about how obsessed can you get with your customization, and that's always my favorite part of a dungeon crawler. One of the reasons I don't care usually for Experience Inc.'s dungeon crawlers like Demon Gaze and stuff is they don't go deep enough into the character building for me, and so that kind of puts me off. So I'm really excited to play the first one of these games because it seems to be really, really into that. Just make as many characters as you want and fiddle with them and experiment.
Yeah, definitely. The dungeon crawler subgenre is absolutely perfect for giving the Disgaea treatment. So, yeah, very interested to give that a go at some point. And like I say, I'd like to do a detailed feature on the first one at some point. So expect that at some point in the next 6 years. I don't know. All right, moving on. Monolithsoft is recruiting staff for a new Legend of Zelda game. So for those who weren't aware, Monolithsoft had some involvement in Breath of the Wild. Which will not surprise you if you've played Breath of the Wild, because there's definitely a fair bit of Xenoblade DNA in there. But yeah, it looks like that they are working directly on whatever the next Zelda game is going to be, which is exciting. No details as yet, obviously. It hasn't been announced or anything yet, but yeah, Monolith being involved again suggests that it's going to be maybe taking the Breath of the Wild approach again with a more sort of open structure and that kind of thing. So, yeah. Hope you're on board with new Zelda.
Well, I am now. Breath of the Wild is the first Zelda I've been crazy about in years. I'm not usually a huge Zelda guy, so when I saw this news, I was super excited.
Yeah, I was skeptical about Breath of the Wild until I started playing it, and like all the things that usually annoy me about open world games, it just neatly sidesteps all of those issues. Yeah, it's wonderful. So I need to play some more of that at some point, but obviously I've been sort of prioritizing other things, but I will definitely make some time to get back into that at some point soon. Okay, moving on. Ys 9, we've finally got a bit of gameplay footage, and we've got some more details about the game itself. So what do we got? There are 5 playable monstrum in the game, who... Hold on. I haven't actually read this yet.
So like the playable characters are all going to be kind of what we guessed way back with those initial screenshots. Each of the 5 playable characters are tied to a different animal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So far they've revealed the cat girl and the hawk guy. And so each of them, based on their different movesets, they'll each also have a unique ability that will tie into navigation, because the actual environment and an added verticality are a huge component of the design for this particular entry. So when you have one of the characters in your party, you'll be able to use their ability for navigation. So like the hawk guy can glide was the example they shared.
There's a screenshot of the cat girl running up the side of a building as well. Yeah,
with her like athletic prowess. And the big thing about all this news that's coming out now that we're finally seeing Ys, which is cool to me, is they just keep teasing the fact that they have not revealed Adel yet. Because they just keep saying that like you're gonna be surprised, because he's supposedly a little older, and I think he's probably got some kind of monster thing going on, like some kind of infection or. So it's just cool how they're being so like coy and mysterious, and they're revealing the other playable characters, but not Adel.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So looking forward to that. One day I will catch up on the Ys. I think it's only 8 I've missed so far.
I was going to say, you're more caught up than I am on Ys, and I'm the one who introduced you to it in the first place.
Yeah. 8's a pretty big one from what I understand, though, so I need to make some time for that. So, all right. Moving on. The Mega Drive Mini has been confirmed to be launching on September the 19th with 40 games. 40 games. The actual lineup will be slightly different between North America, Europe, and Japan. So the Japanese version includes Castlevania Bloodlines, which people are quite excited about. Mm-hmm. And another thing that people are quite excited about is that it's actually being developed by M2. So that suggests that the sort of hardware and the emulation side of things is going to be good. And the menu music is composed by Yuzo Koshiro, which is exciting. It uses USB controllers, and the actual physical unit has got, you can sort of slide the switches down and sort of open the cartridge slot and stuff. Obviously, with it being a mini console, you can't actually put a cartridge in there, but they've actually bothered to go that extra step with the sort of modelling of the unit so that it works, or at least looks as if it works as the original one did. So yeah, that's cool. Interested in that at all?
In general, I'm not interested in any of these mini consoles. I don't get it. But this one I might bite on. Mm-hmm. A, because of the involvement of M2. B, because 40 games is a lot of games.
Yeah.
And the other mini consoles, one of the reasons I've never bit on them was because I always just found the selection of games on them anemic. Mm-hmm. Like, these things should have 100 games on them.
Yeah.
I find it offensive how few games are on the mini NES and the mini SNES and definitely on the PlayStation. So this thing is really... I actually made fun of SaGa a lot over the past couple months because we would just keep getting snippets in the news, like more information on the mini Mega Drive is coming, and I'm like, just release the goddamn thing. But like now we're finding out that they're really putting some thought into making it a comprehensive package. So I'm actually kind of impressed with what they're doing with this. Like, this might be the one I buy, and not just because I'm a hardcore SaGa kid, but it really does seem like it's a more comprehensive, more thoughtful product than the other ones that we've seen.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be keeping an eye on that, definitely. It'll be good to see what the final lineup of games is. The Japanese one has got some quite interesting stuff in there, so it's
right out the gate,
Yeah, so besides Castlevania Bloodlines, you've got things that we expect, like Space Harrier, Shining Force, and Comic Zone, and that sort of thing. We've also got Gunstar Heroes, which is nice. We've got a Puyo Puyo game on there. We've got Mado Monogatari as well, which is an interesting inclusion. For those unfamiliar, Mado Monogatari is the dungeon crawling RPG that is the reason Puyo Puyo exists, and was also reimagined as Sorcery Saga Curse of the Great Curry God, although with completely different characters in that case. So yeah, that's quite an interesting inclusion, because I don't know how well known that is in Japan. It's certainly not super well known over here, but yeah, it's just an interesting inclusion regardless.
It surely won't be on the English one, no doubt.
Almost certainly not. No, not with that never having had an official localization anyway. So, but you never know. We could be surprised, but we probably won't be. Anyway, moving swiftly along, we've had confirmation that the new Sakura Wars game is coming west in spring 2020, and we've had a few more details and shots of some of the characters in there. So the character designs of this one are done by Tite Kubo, who is most famous for Bleach. And the scenario, or one of the scenario writers is Jiro Ishii, who's worked on 428 Shibuya Scramble and Time Travelers. So yeah, this is looking cool. I don't know the series at all. I mean, I picked up a copy of the Wii version a while back, while I saw a copy, because it's one of those ones that's probably going to go up in price at some point. I got it for about 20 quid, I think, which is quite expensive for a Wii game at the moment, but not unreasonable. So and again, it's one that I wanted to have a look at. But yeah, this is looking cool. So it's just coming to PS4, so no word on a Switch version at the moment. But yeah, and it looks like it's going to be Japanese only voice at the moment.
That's okay.
They have, yeah, that's fine.
It's taking place in Japan. So
yeah. Yeah, so that's entirely appropriate. So, I mean, I'm sure some people will complain about there not being a dub, but, you know, people complain about everything these days. So.
Some people will also complain if there is a dub, so...
I know, you really can't win.
I just think this is huge because, A, there hasn't been a new Sakura Wars game in almost 10 years. So Long My Love, the Western versions of that came out in 2010.
Yeah.
So by the time this comes out, it will have been 10 years. But also, that it was confirmed for a Western release immediately. Like, these are strange and wonderful times we live in, because So Long My Love is the only Sakura Wars we got in the States. Yeah. And in the West, in English in general. And it was like 5. It was like Sakura was 5. Like, I mean, I remember in my like late teens muddling through my import Saturn copy of 2. Like, I don't speak a word of Japanese, but just knowing how legendary the series was, so like I had to play it. Like, I love this series conceptually, so just the fact that we're getting a new one. I grew up you can't even, like, the cover of my DVD copy of the original OVA series is like, you can't even open it. Like, the hinges like are tearing on the DVD case. Like, I couldn't even tell you how many times I've watched it in my life. Like, I love this property.
Yeah, cool. Another one that I very much want to explore in some depth at some time, because like I say, I don't know a lot about it aside from I know how sort of legendary it is and how well regarded it is, but I don't know the specifics as yet.
All you need to know is it's a visual novel series that I like.
Yeah.
Like, dating sim elements, and I like it.
Yep.
Like, it's good.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. All right, so that is coming to Japan the twilight hours of this year, and coming over to the West in spring of 2020, so watch out for that. Compile Heart made a bunch of Neptunia announcements recently. So there's going to be a new game, there's going to be an anime OVA, and some secret other new project that we don't know anything about as yet. So the new game is called Game E Ninja Neptune. Yeah, that's about all we know at the moment. So it's going to involve something about e-ninjas. Whatever that means.
As long as it's not the ninja guy who plays Fortnite. That's the type of e-ninjas we're trying to avoid here.
Oh, I don't know. I'm surely sort of streamer culture is ripe for Neptunia to parody at some point.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. Because I mean, they have sort of kept with the times in some of the games. So, like, sort of Mega Dimension was about the sort of the changeover between console generations. The Neptunia U was about sort of the lack of trust people have in games journalism and all sorts. So yeah, they do have their finger on the pulse of things like that. So it's not just sort of straight sort of timeless parody. It is sort of relevant to certain things. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility, but yeah, probably not.
That'd be cool.
I think it's yeah. So the animation is an OVA that's going to be launching in 2019. Looks like it involves older Neptune from Mega Dimension, as well as the other characters. Purple Heart seems to have got a bit of a redesign. So rather than her sort of black one-piece thing, she's now wearing a sort of white two-piece thing. It's not the same one as she was wearing in Four Goddesses Online either, so it's another slightly different design for her. So that's looking cool. There is a trailer out for that now, but that's about all the details we've got at the moment. So yeah, looking forward to that. I haven't actually watched the previous anime yet. I heard mixed reports about it, but the sort of style of it looked fairly charming, so I'll have to check that out at some point.
I think it focuses more on like the cute goofiness.
Yes,
than the actual storytelling. So if you love the characters and you're not going in with high expectations, like I watched a episode of it, and it was a lot of just like, like falling down in a field of flowers, like adorable stuff happening. Like, there wasn't a hell of a lot of like, it's not interested in telling a serious story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's relatively few of the Neptunia games have sort of told a serious story anyway. So I think Four Goddesses Online did, and Mega Dimension did, but sort of the first three in particular, they kind of had a plot, but sort of the most important thing about all of them has always been those sort of character-centric moments between them, and how they interact and how those relationships develop. So yeah, I guess that's kind of appropriate. Okay, other bits and bobs. Mary Skelter 2 is coming to Switch, apparently, which is nice, because that released for PlayStation 4 in Japan last year. I believe they haven't actually confirmed that for the West yet, have they? But I think I'd be surprised if we didn't see that. But yeah, there is a Switch version coming to Japan, which is cool. Criminal Girls X, or Criminal Girls Cross, however you pronounce that, is going to be sold as both a free-to-play game and a one-off purchase, which is something that made me happy, and something that I wish more games did. So yeah, it's going to be a pay-once version, so that doesn't sound as if it's a you buy it and still have to do microtransactions. It's just a you buy the game. So presumably it's going to be some sort of episodic thing in the free-to-play version. apparently there's going to be more details on the April the 26th when they do a full reveal of the game itself. And they say the purchase method is a bit different from usual, whatever that means. And the only other details that have been provided so far is that there is a motorcycle involved, and the player is a cat who rides the motorcycle.
Oh, this is this is the one that Image Epoch is involved with, right?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. So
or the former people of Image Epoch.
Yeah. So and yeah, I think Nipponichi is involved in it as well. So yeah, not a huge amount of details yet besides some concept art and stuff, but yeah, there's a very sort of biker aesthetic going on with it. There's sort of like big jackets with patches on and that sort of thing, and sort of delinquent girls and that kind of thing. We do know that the new game is lacking the punishment mechanics from the first two, which has upset a few people. But you know, if the whole thing is sort of designed in that way in the first place, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's all
you
about
can play the first two.
Yeah, exactly.
Let this game be this game.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's that. So it's currently in development for iOS, Android, and PC in Japan, and there is a possibility that we'll get a PlayStation 4 version in the West, but that hasn't been confirmed or denied one way or the other as yet. Like I said, there's going to be more information on that on April the 26th. Okay, moving on. What else have we got? Oh yeah, Shantae 5 is on the way. Very exciting. No details as yet, just a bit of concept art or promotional art.
There's like a 30-second video clip too.
Oh, is there?
Yeah,
I haven't actually seen that yet, so I'll have to check that out.
It's like nothing. It's just like her hair whipping.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So that is coming to PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, PC, and Apple Arcade, which we'll talk a bit more about in just a moment. Other tiny little bits and pieces. There's apparently a PlayStation 5 patent by Sony that suggests it will be backwards compatible with pretty much everything, which will make everyone very happy if it's true. However, temper your expectations a bit, because companies file patents all the time and don't necessarily do anything with them. So, but yeah, the patent, there is a diagram there that when you put in a game, it sort of establishes whether or not the thing you've put in is designed for the new CPU or a legacy CPU, and it sort of branches off in different directions according to what is going on.
Are we saying, like, not just... When I read this, I just was like, backwards compatible to PlayStation 4, which I thought would be delightful. Are we talking a potential, like, mother PlayStation unit that can play the 600 plus games I have for all PlayStation consoles?
Don't know yet. We don't know yet, and so, like I say, temper your expectations, because this may not even happen at all. But yeah, the kind of structure it suggests is that according to what you've put in there, it will run the system in backward compatibility mode, and then it will either deliberately slow down the system to match the older system, or it will alter the way the program's running, or it will disable certain features of the console or the software, or it will restrict access to system resources and so on. So yeah, so it looks like there's sort of 4 different routes that the backwards compatibility can go down according to the requirements of the software. So I don't know if that means sort of four different generations of PlayStation hardware, or just according to what the specific software requirements are. But yeah, so the idea of a mother PlayStation is very, very appealing indeed. Particularly if they find a way to make it region free. That would just be, I would frankly, I would come.
Yeah, I'd be done, man. I'd be done. Like, I don't even care how big it could be. The size of a goddamn printer. It could. Like, yeah. I don't care what it looks like, how big it is. Like, if I could have one unit with one HDMI cable that could play it. I've got a lot of games for PlayStation console.
Yes, so have I. Yes, the majority of my collection is PlayStation 2. I've got a lot of PlayStation 3 and a fair few PlayStation 1 games as well, and a lot of PlayStation 4 as well. So yeah, having one system that can play all of those would be amazing. But as I say, this is just a patent application. It's not confirmation that we even have a PlayStation 5. So just bear that in mind. Take this with a pinch of salt for a minute, but the possibilities are very appealing indeed. All right, I think this is probably a good time to move on to one of the things I wanted to talk about in a bit more depth now, which is sort of 2 new gaming platforms that have been announced.
I'm laughing already.
Yeah. So the first of these to be announced was Google's system, which is called Stadia. And this is another attempt at doing streaming games. So the intention behind this is that Google has these very powerful systems that you connect to through any web browser. So theoretically, you can do it from any computer, from a Chromebook, from a tablet, from whatever. They do all the heavy lifting for the game, and then they stream the video back to you in up to 4K and 60 frames per second, because everyone's internet connection can handle that kind of video output these days.
I was just going to say, it's flawless. It's foolproof.
Yeah, yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
Everyone who works at Google will be able to stream games in 4K.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hate this. I hate everything about this and want nothing to do with it. But there's been a lot of people getting weirdly aggressively defensive about this. Can you be aggressively defensive? I guess you can, can't you?
Sure you can.
Yeah.
Best offense is a good defense.
So there have been a lot of people who've been suggesting that this is the future of gaming and you better jump on board with it. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind and whatever. I mean, there are certain benefits to this. So if we think about the AAA sector and how much money and time and effort they have to spend at the moment porting games to several different platforms, if they have one standardized platform that they can release their stuff on that they know is going to at least theoretically perform the same way on everyone's system, that will be a benefit to them. That will help them produce stuff that will be a sort of standardized experience without having to worry about pro systems, without having to worry about Xbox One X, without having to worry about PC specs. And so in theory that's a good thing. The reason that I hate it and want nothing to do with it is just the whole idea of streaming in general. I find really off-putting, just because I mean, like, the main argument against it is not owning your stuff. And the counter argument to that, of course, is that, well, you haven't owned your stuff for a long time now, with the rise of digital downloads and stuff like that, and even to a lesser extent with the case of on-disc stuff that requires online authentication or requires you to download patches to make the games playable and so on. But the point is, in those cases, you've still got a thing. You've still got a thing you can hold there. You can still see it. It's still a physical thing that you can actually sort of attach memories and things to. When you've got a big streaming library, I mean, I've already mentioned it once today about Caladrius Blaze being lost in one of my digital libraries. When you have a digital library, it's easy to lose things in. When you have a streaming library where you have access to everything that is on that service, one, how are you going to find anything? And two, how are you going to make the choice of the things to do in the first place? I mean, like, we already have a huge problem with people not finishing games at the moment, which it always makes me a bit sad when I look at the trophy stats for something that's like maybe a story-heavy game or something like that. And you see that, like, well, I mean, the most hilarious one is like 72% of people have started this game. But then you look at the have finished this game stat, and it's down at like the sort of 12% mark or something like that. And
I'm just as skilled. I've finished.
Oh, I know.
I've finished one RPG in about a decade. Xenoblade 2 is like the only RPG I've finished in a very long time. Yeah.
And I mean, that's a huge problem for developers who are making an effort to make these epic games and sort of write these stories and hoping and expecting that people will see them through from start to finish, and the vast majority of players just don't seem to be doing that for one reason or other. I'd say either they're jumping from one game to another, or they're spending all their time playing sort of more lifestyle games like Fortnite that have no real end to them. And so I don't know. There just seem to be so many things with this that just haven't been considered. I mean, like this, by extension, there's all the other aspects of the industry that would be affected by this as well.
Let's be clear. This isn't for guys like you and me.
No.
This isn't for guys who want to play or who are excited about whatever new RPG. What's the people who want to play TikTok Travelers are not going to play. Are not interested in Stadia. Right? Yeah. This is for your Fortnite players. This is for your Apex Legends players. Your Call of Duty people. Your people who are primarily interested in games that are presented and hosted as games as service. Games that don't have an end in sight. games that are primarily focused on fleeting experiences that are no longer valid when the new one comes out. So like I like to think about the Division. A lot of people who have a real interest in game design really love the Division games, the new ones out, and a lot of people whose opinions I really respect are all about it. But when they're done with that, and then the Division 3 comes out, no one cares about the Division 2, right?
Yeah.
This is who this is for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is why I object to the number of people whose opinions I normally respect to, who have been touting this as like the one true way for gaming to go. And like, well, for certain parts of the industry, yes, it's probably a good idea if they can sort out things like the latency and getting good quality video streaming to you, which I still don't think the world's infrastructure is up to just yet.
I still have trouble streaming sitcoms on Netflix sometimes.
Yeah.
And I pay for a good internet connection at home.
Yeah.
Like I get like 120 megabits a second. Like I'm not slouching here.
Yeah.
Like, and I still like sometimes I'll try to stream an episode of Schitt's Creek and it'll pause up in the middle of it. Like,
yeah.
And you're telling me I'm going to get a 4K game going? No.
Yeah. So like I say, what is going to happen to the smaller games, like the sort of B tier stuff that both you and I like getting? I mean, the suggestion that a lot of people are making is like, oh, this is going to be the death of consoles. This is going to be the only way you do things. But no, it's not, because a lot of these developers and publishers, they're just not going to want to do this just because their stuff is going to get lost. No one's going to play it. Why would they do it? It just seems a bit strange how into this certain people are being. When it's not a proven technology. I still don't think it's going to work, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong about lots of things.
None of the people who I read shit from, who are interested in games in the same way you and I are excited about it. Like one of my favorite people, I'm sorry I can't remember her name right now, but I really love the woman who does the weekly gaming column over at Anime News Network. Mm-hmm. She's wonderful, and she was like, no. Like, there's people out there who are on the same page as you and I. There's just no interest. And honestly, if this is the future of gaming, I'm going to turn into that weirdo, at the gaming equivalent of that weirdo you meet at the record store with like the Grateful Dead patches on his denim jacket, who only buys vinyl.
Yep.
Like, that's
exactly
it.
The same.
Like, that's
exactly the same.
That's it. Like, I will put a pin in the last generation of consoles, PlayStation 5 or whatever it is, and that's it. Like, they stopped making video games after that. Like, and I can live in my backlog till I die already. Yeah. I currently own 1,487 games by my last count. Mm-hmm. I never have to buy another video game again.
Yep.
I do it because I want to.
Yep.
I have RPGs that have the shrink wrapping on them. Like, don't have to play video games. If video games go in a direction where the technology and the monetary model no longer aligns with my interests or values, I don't have to support the industry anymore.
Yep.
And I won't.
Yep. Exactly the same. So I think that's probably everything I wanted to say about Stadia. I did also want to acknowledge Apple's. It almost felt like a response to it, but obviously they've been planning this for a while as well.
I don't even know anything about this. The only reason I know it exists is because, the Shantae is going to be on it. Like, that's literally the only reason I know it exists. Yeah,
so Apple Arcade is coming this fall. And obviously with it being an Apple product, it's specifically designed for Apple products. So iPhone, iPad, Mac, and Apple TV. I don't know if they'll extend it out beyond that. It would make sense for them to do that, but this is Apple. They don't necessarily do things that make sense.
Or things I'm remotely interested in.
Indeed. So, the gist with Apple Arcade is, again, it's a subscription-based service rather than something you buy stuff from. But the difference from Stadia is that you download the stuff. You download the stuff and you play it locally, so you're not streaming anything. It also has the ability to play offline, so that once you have downloaded a thing from Apple Arcade, you can just play it without being connected to the internet. There's no ads. There are no in-app purchases, which is a big deal because, Apple basically invented the in-app purchase that we have in its modern form, so fuck them. So for them to specifically say no in-app purchases, is kind of a big deal. But
to be fair, though, they have also been at the forefront of creating innovative parental controls and stuff to control them once the backlash against them started.
That's true.
Like they've been conscious about the fact that it can be a dangerous economic model, and they've been a strong player in making sure parents can say no.
Yes.
And stuff like that.
Okay, maybe fuck them not quite so hard.
Oh, fuck them, but like it can be with a rib dildo instead of a spiked one. Like,
oh, nice. But yeah, anyway, the interesting thing about Apple Arcade is that it's specifically not courting that AAA market. It is very, very indie-centric from the look of things. So Apple has specifically teamed up with a lot of smaller developers, and it sounds as if they're sort of providing them with resources and funding and stuff to help them realize their ambitions for the games that they're producing. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that is exclusive to Apple Arcade, because basically Apple will have helped to fund these projects. And then it's going to be stuff like Shantae, where it will just be available on Apple Arcade as well as more traditional platforms as well. So, I mean, most of the stuff that they've announced so far hasn't looked especially appealing to me, to be honest. So we've got sort of an isometric, artsy-looking narrative puzzler, which looks fairly generic, to be honest. I know people love stuff like Monument Valley and stuff, but you know, that kind of game just doesn't really do it for me anymore. We have a game called The Pathless, which has quite an interesting looking, very stylized graphics to it. So supposedly a surreal and mythic adventure with a cinematic blend of action and story. We have a multiplayer Lego brawler.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah,
those games are fun.
Yeah. Whether or not that's Lego Battle Royale remains to be seen, but yeah, they are specifically calling it a Lego Brawler rather than Lego Battle Royale at the moment. There's a game based around the concept of the floor is lava, where the floor is literally lava in what looks like sort of fairly convincing real-world environments. But so like you're in a living room, but the floor is literally lava. There's a sequel to Oceanhorn, which I know is quite a well-received game a while back.
Oh yes, I rather like Oceanhorn.
Yeah, so that was sort of it's vaguely Zelda-like, isn't it, that one?
Yeah, it just is Zelda. It's just a skin. It's like, it's good though. Competent isn't a great compliment, I guess, but it's very good. It's charming. It's made with love. Like, I really like it. I'm really sad that I missed the limited run press of it, because it's quite a good game.
And then finally, I think the most interesting one for me is Revolution Software is finally doing a sequel to a very old game that they did ages ago called Beneath the Steel Sky. Which was an old point-and-click adventure with a sort of very, very kind of cyberpunk Blade Runner type thing going on.
Yeah, that's a great game.
And they're doing a sequel to that called Beyond the Steel Sky. So, again, there's going to be puzzles and character interaction and hacking and that sort of thing. It's unfolding in what looks like a 3D environment now rather than traditional 2D point-and-click. Doesn't specifically say that this is going to be exclusive to Apple Arcade, but with them kind of highlighting it, kind of suggests that it might be.
Timed exclusivity.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You know how these things go.
Yeah, we can hope. Anyway, but yeah, they seem to have a lot of games lined up for this already. I think they claim they're going to be launching with like 100 games on it, which some people have criticised because, again, if you launch with 100 games, again, you're going to have that same discoverability issue.
Too many games, yeah.
Yeah, it's too many games to start with. But if you have a look at apple.com/apple-arcade, there's sort of some teaser screenshots of all of those. Things like Sonic Racing and stuff is coming to it as well. So
that's cool.
It looks like there's going to be some support from bigger developers as well. But its primary focus seems to be kind of funding these indie efforts, which is an interesting approach. Again, I don't really have any interest in it because we don't really have a lot of Apple devices in our house anymore. Both the wife and I have mostly switched over to Android for our phones. My Mac is woefully out of date now, so probably won't run a lot of these things. And if I do any computer gaming now, which I don't do a lot of, that tends to be on Windows PC anyway. But anyway, so I mean that might be worth keeping an eye on. And I'm certainly more receptive to that than I am to Stadia, just purely because it's download based rather than streaming based.
Right.
But yeah, again, it's not a particular direction I want gaming to head off in. So, Okay, one other fairly substantial thing I want to talk about then, which is that Senran Kagura creator Kenichiro Takaki has left Marvelous, and he's cited sort of recent changes in policy. He didn't mention Sony by name, but it's pretty obvious what he's talking about here. So he has left Marvelous Games, but it was an amicable split from the sound of things. He's working on a new project, and he's going to finish off the project he's working on. He's just not directly employed by them anymore. And he is moving on to SaGa, who are the producers of Grand Blue Fantasy, who just recently have been sort of spreading their wings a lot more and starting to look more into making console games. So we've got Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, which is the game that Platinum was working on. They've got the Grand Blue Fantasy one-on-one fighting game as well, which is coming up as well.
That looks so good.
Yeah. And so he's going to be working on some sort of more traditional fantasy type thing with SaGa. No details on that as yet. And he is also, before he left, he sort of made a start on a new project with Marvelous as well, which there's only really a screenshot that's been released so far. But my God, the colours in that screenshot look gorgeous. Yeah, so beautifully colourful thing. He said specifically it's that one is going to have beautiful girls in it, but no sort of stripping mechanics. So he describes it as a more traditional hot-blooded game, and it's apparently got a girl riding a bike in it as well. So that's whatever that is. So he's gonna continue working on that. From outside Marvelous, and then in the meantime working on this what he describes as a more orthodox fantasy game with SaGa. So we will see what happens there. Yeah, so there's a good interview with him over at was it Silicon Era who posted it?
Yeah, I mean it wasn't. I don't think it was them who did the interview, but they did translate.
Oh yeah, here we are. So yeah, so it was an interview with Famitsu. And then Silicon Era just translated and republished it. So he described it. He described the change in restrictions recently as specifically about sort of representing sexuality in video games. So his words were, "Up until now, there's been parts that changed here and there, but as of late, it's been can't do that, or probably not that either, and basically everything is no good." And yeah, he's just fed up with that basically.
I think this is weird, though, because, like, obviously I understand his frustrations, but I feel like he's just using this as an opportunity to vent about this stuff more so than it actually having much to do with... I think this is very much a business move he's making, and I think he's just using this to be vocal about something he's frustrated with, because, I mean, let's be clear, he's going over to SaGa to make a console game. Mm-hmm. It's still going to be subject to the same restrictions. Yeah. And the game he's making is less sexualized than anything he's made before. Yeah. He's said he's making a traditional fantasy style game of the type that he's like the type that we all grew up with. Yeah. But the type that we all grew up with doesn't have like women with quadruple D tits and like panties exploding off. Like he's making a traditional game. So like I think he's more just using his limelight right now to complain about something that's bothering him. Mm-hmm. I think behind the scenes there's a lot more we're never going to know about like the business and career decisions behind this move. I highly doubt this stuff actually has much to do with what he's doing. Yeah. Yeah, so it's an interesting one though, and I think it's good that someone like him has spoken up about it, because sort of I think the temptation for a lot of Japanese creators in particular is just to sort of roll over and say this. It's not really part of a lot of the Japanese way of doing things to complain about this sort of thing. And so for him to actually be vocal about this, I think is good. Yeah. But I think you're probably right. This is probably just an opportunity for him to kind of highlight what he's been doing and what his future projects are going to be. Because he's also staying on to produce Senran Kagura. Like he's not going to never work with Marvelous again. Like he's said he's going to continue to produce Senran Kagura titles. So it's not like he's also never going to touch this kind of stuff again. There's just not going to be like changing room mechanics in the new Senran Kaguras. Mm-hmm. And like, guess what? Those were stupid anyway. I'm not offended.
Oh, you're going to get hate for that.
I don't care. I'm not part of the gaming community. I don't care. Senran Kagura is lots of fun. I love Senran Kagura. But those stupid interactive elements, they're not games anyway. Like, it's dumb. Yeah. Like, whatever. It's when you design something, you design it to a razor's edge. You cut the things that don't make it better.
Yeah.
So as much as I'm not offended by the stripping mechanics and the changing room mechanics and all that stuff, but it from a game design perspective, it doesn't add anything to the games anyway. Like
I think in the case of Senran Kagura, the sort of in combat stripping stuff serves a purpose. I to be honest, I never engaged with the changing room, the boinging the boobs around and stuff sort of thing. Besides, like getting a trophy for it, something like that. If I felt like it, the stripping stuff does have a purpose that I've talked about in my various articles on it. So I think that's fine because it's a sort of visual depiction of damage, and it's also sort of a metaphorical depiction of mastery over each other and that sort of thing. But yeah, I entirely agree. Like I still picked up the PS4 version of Burst Renewal because the stuff that was cut is not stuff that I really care about. And like, as far as Senran Kagura goes, I do believe that the kind of sexualized aspect of it is an important part of its aesthetic. It's
absolutely
kind of, the kind of shameless aesthetic is an important part of it, but at the same time, I don't play those games to get my rocks off to. I play those games because, one, I like the aesthetic and I like the girls and stuff, but not because I want to crack one off over them. But I play those games because they're presented in a way that appeals to me, and because I like the story and I like the characters.
Exactly.
And in fact, he kind of brings this up in this interview here. So Famitsu asked that Senran Kagura has its share of sexual presentation, but I've always had the impression it was just part of an element that made the title. So you're saying even that got more difficult to do. And his response was that when looking at the whole thing, in reality, it's only about 10% or 20% of the elements that are actually different, and there's parts that stand out. But in spite of that, when looking at it in terms of worldwide standards, it gets judged as everything is sexual, and that's what really hurts. And yeah, I've brought this up a few times. Like before the first 3DS game came out over here, there was an article by someone on the official Nintendo magazine in this country, and his article was, "This game is damaging the games industry. Here's how to stop it." And like, no. Because his whole article was based on like purely looking at some screenshots of it. Like he had no idea what this game was about. He had no idea about the fact it had a story. He had no idea about the fact that it had characterization and stuff like that. And I've seen that happen several times with that series in particular over the years, and it just makes me so frustrated every time it happens.
Because pizza with pineapples on it is ruining all pizza. Just because I don't like pizza with pineapples on it means all pizza from now on.
And it's just so fucking annoying because everyone who starts on that kind of path of sort of saying this is bad and it's terrible, it's ruining everything, they just won't listen to you when you give them some sort of response to it. It's like, well, no, look, here is some evidence and some facts about this thing that you've been ranting about. And they're just like, no, fuck off, blocked.
No. Perspective is not one of the tools of the internet. Which is why we're not good at the internet. Which is why I have 196 followers on my Instagram page.
We're not good at the internet, or are we the best at the internet?
Oh, could we be top tier? Are we just so elite that we're separate from the rest?
Right. Anyway, that is everything I wanted to talk about. One thing I spotted that we haven't mentioned yet, you probably want to still bring up. You want to mention Tribute Games thing as well?
Oh, that new game. I didn't even put the link up for that. What's that called?
It's called Panzer Paladin.
Yeah, Panzer Paladin. So Tribute, which is like one of my favorite studios in the whole wide world, right? The people behind Wizorb and originally the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World game, Mercenary Kings, Flint Hook. They're just wonderful. They are making a new game called Panzer Paladin, which has a beautiful NES aesthetic. And it has a bit of like, what's the name of that game? I can't remember. The one like LucasArts did it. Called Suits Lanos series. Like,
yes.
So you're it's like a medieval. So you're in like a mech that kind of looks like a knight. And it's got this like medieval futuristic fused visual style, which I'm so all about. It's painful. And so you're in your mech, and you can also get out of your mech. and be like a little tiny soldier on the battlefield. And then the little tiny soldier has like a whip they can use in combat. And they've said very specifically that the game has the inspiration for the game and the way it plays is the original Legend of Zelda 2. Because they were inspired by the way the sword play in the side-scrolling elements was really kind of advanced for its time, with like the downward strikes and being able to duck and stuff. So they're very interested in exploring a kind of a sword play heavy approach to a side-scroller with this frankly delicious setting. So
yes,
and I don't know if Patrice Bourgeau is doing the soundtrack for it or not, but he has for most of their games, and he's wonderful. So everything they put together is just so delightful.
Yeah,
I'm out of words to use, but yeah, like this is going to be good.
Yeah, it looks pretty lovely. Again, not a ton of details yet because this isn't coming until spring of 2020, but they have announced it. There's a website up for it now with some screenshots. And who did you want to know if we was doing the music?
Patrice Bourgeau.
Yes, he is doing the music.
Oh, yeah, so it will be wonderful. Because his work is very, very distinct, and there's really no one else out there who does work like he does in terms of fusing rock and roll with chiptune in a way that feels exceedingly natural, but so aurally distinct that it's definitely not regular chiptunes. Like, yeah, just wonderful. He's one of my favorite composers in the modern scene.
Cool. Well, yeah, one to look forward to next year. There, it's a lot of great stuff coming next year, isn't there?
Yeah, nothing but. And the end of and the end of this year.
Yeah. Oh God.
TikTok Travelers got confirmed for the West.
Yes.
For fall, finally. Destiny Connect. Can't wait for that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Nothing but good games to play all the time anymore. We live in strange and wonderful times. Do we also want to pay just a second of lip service to the fact that everyone was right and Nintendo Labo was just a prototype for them to finally make VR? Because the Labo VR kit's happening, so Google Cardboard and your Switch is just going to slot into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like I mean, it's not going to be a full VR experience in that it looks like it's like a pair of goggles that you have to physically hold on your face.
Yeah.
But I'm sure some developers will probably find something clever to do with that as well. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I've been thinking that would be an interesting thing for them to do for a long time. So yeah, cool to see that. All right, now that's been nearly an hour of news. So yeah, good stuff. All right. Let's take a short break and we'll come back in a moment and we'll talk about what we've been playing lately. So see you in a moment.
To immerse yourself in the game world. Turn around 360 degrees and no matter where you look, you'll always see the game screen. Pretty cool. Building your VR goggles is simple. Just follow the interactive instructions on your Nintendo Switch. Then insert the Nintendo Switch console and you're good to go. To play, attach the VR goggles to your Toy-Con creations. Yeah, just like that.
Welcome back. So, for our second segment, we talk about what we've been playing lately. So, would you like to go first?
Sure. So, the main thing I've been playing lately is, in our previous episode, we talked about that, the good folks at Squaresoft were being kind enough to do a reprint run of the Kingdom Hearts Story So Far bundle because it had become quite rare and scalpers were making it very unpleasant to get. So I did manage to grab a copy of the reprint, and so I've been basically beginning the journey of educating myself on Kingdom Hearts because I only ever played the original one when it first launched, and I was probably 18 and I didn't care for it, but I'm not a shitty 18-year-old anymore. So I've also resigned myself to play them in chronological order instead of release order.
Yeah.
So I'm starting with Birth by Sleep, which is the PSP one. And that because chronologically that's the first one. So I've been playing Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep on the PS4. It's been very interesting. I mean, you have to take the good with the bad, obviously understanding that this is a HD port of a PSP game.
Yes.
So it's almost charming in how, like, barren it is. Like, you're like, oh, I'm inside Cinderella's castle, and it's just like a giant box with textures on 6 sides and like 2 pillars, and like 2 pillars in the middle. And it's like the Cinderella episode. It's like, we've got to get Cinderella to the ball, and you get to the quote unquote the ball, and it's just Cinderella and the prince dancing in a giant empty floor. There's no one else at the ball.
That's one of my favourite things I like about going back to play like sort of early 2000s, late 90s first-person games like Deus Ex and Vampire Bloodlines and that sort of thing. It's like you go to the club scene and there's like one dude on the floor just sort of mashing away, and you're like, yeah, this party's really rocking, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know. That's Birth by Sleep. I really like it. Honestly, I don't know enough about Kingdom Hearts to speak about what mechanics are unique to it versus other Kingdom Hearts games. Especially because I'm playing it out of order, right? So like, I don't know what like parts of the battle system came from previous ones, what parts are new, but I am really enjoying it. It's really cool. It's got this really neat mechanic, which once again could be in other Kingdom Hearts games. I don't know, where you equip your abilities, and then your abilities level up. And then you can fuse those abilities to make new abilities.
Yeah, I've only played 1 and 2, and a tiny bit of Chain of Memories, which I totally didn't understand at the time, but I would like to revisit. So I don't think that was in the mainline ones. I think it was just literally like a case of you either use the menu or you put shortcuts to things like Cure and stuff on there. So I don't think they leveled up though.
Yeah. So like in this you have like they call it let's say they treat it like cards, right? They call it your like deck, your deck of moves, and so each move levels up, and then there's a fusion mechanic where like, you know, so you level up 2 versions of Cure to max level, then you can fuse them and make Cura. You know, or you can have a move that's like a blitz tackle and then blizzard, and then you can fuse them to make like a tackle with an ice element attached to it.
That's cool.
And then when you do that fusion, you can also like add like a gem to it, and then that gem attaches another ability to that move. So then there's like a gem that's like, this gem gives you an ability that increases enemy drop rate of health curing orbs. So then once you do that fusion, you get that move. That move also comes with that ability attached to it. Then when you level up that move you just made to max level, the ability that was on it, like the whatever, like get more health orbs from enemies, that just gets added to your character as a permanent bonus.
Oh, cool.
So like that's kind of how you develop your characters. Like you level up traditionally, and there's different keyblades and stuff to equip, but that's really how you max out your guys, is by paying careful attention to what abilities you're producing with your move fusions, and then mastering to add to their roster.
Yeah.
So I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I remember not liking the combat in the first Kingdom Hearts when I played it back when I was really young, but I'm really enjoying the combat in Birth by Sleep so far. When I first played Kingdom Hearts, I kind of thought the combat was really clunky and I didn't like it. But now that as an adult I understand different approaches to design, I'm kind of understanding that Kingdom Hearts was never meant to be like a button mashy, fast-paced action RPG. There's a very specific pacing to it that almost makes it feel turn-based. So like the attacks land with quite a bit of weight and some pause in between, even in the middle of your own combos. And enemies choreograph their attacks very clearly, leaving opportunities for you to dodge or counter. And there's a very satisfying rhythmic timing to it that I wasn't able to appreciate years ago. But now I'm really digging it.
Yeah, I remember in the first one there was a very strong emphasis on like positioning as well. So like there were a lot of enemies that you could only hit from the back and that sort of thing. So yeah, I assume that's something that carries on in the other installments. 2 had a really cool sort of countering system as well. That I remember enjoying quite a bit. There's a really cool bit in the absolute finale of that game that makes great use of that countering system. So look forward to that when you get to it.
Yeah, so it's entertaining to me because I mean, I've always been kind of anti-Kingdom Hearts because my initial experiences with it weren't great, but I'm really coming around to it. And what I think is really funny is that, you know, in the anti-Kingdom Hearts kind of camp that I used to be a pretty vocal part of, there was always just a huge, like, the biggest insult was like, it's button mashy, the combat's mindless. It's super not. It's super cool, and it's rhythmic and really satisfying to do right. Like, you could button mash your way through it and succeed, but it's the same thing as with a fighting game. You can also button mash your way to success in a fighting game, but that doesn't mean you're playing the game correctly or the way it's meant to be played or on the developer's terms. If you take the time to learn it and engage with it, it's really interesting and really satisfying, and your characters can do a really cool ballet of damage and movement and zipping around the battlefield, and I'm really liking it, and I'm really looking forward to exploring the rest of them.
Cool. Yeah. Again, another series that I'll be checking out in detail at some point, because that's such a sprawling series. I'll probably do that over the sort of longer term in like a delving into series or something, or maybe some videos. I haven't decided yet, but yeah, I think I own all of the Kingdom Hearts games except one in one form or another now. So I think it's just one of the, which one is it? It's the one that is just the cutscenes for, and one of the HD remixes, I think, that I haven't got yet.
Is that the like the 2.8 remix? The one with the Aqua, the one with
I think it's Coded is the one I haven't got.
Oh, okay,
possibly.
Yeah. So Coded's the DS one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's the only one I haven't got.
Honestly, you could probably do without Coded, from what I understand. Coded is like an enhanced port of a mobile phone game.
Ah, yes, I do remember.
So it's not like the strongest, and it's literally just like, from what I understand structurally, it's just like a series of like flashbacks and what if scenarios.
Yeah,
Like,
I remember the mobile phone game being episodic.
Yeah.
But,
The general consensus is that with Coded, you can pretty much just do the cinematics.
Nah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Maybe we'll do that then.
But the one other handheld one that's cinematics only on the bundle I do want to play. I can't remember.
There's the 3DS one, isn't there? Dream Drop Distance?
No, that's playable.
Is it?
That's fully remastered, yeah. So Dream Drop Distance was fully remastered on the second HD package. The 2.8 remix has Dream Drop Distance, which is very well regarded. Dream Drop Distance has another one of the cinematics based on the mobile phone game, the Kai. Unchained, I think it was called. And then it has the episode 2.8, which is a whole new game.
Yes.
The episode it's a short game. It's only like 5 to 10 hours, but it's a direct bridge between the events of 2 and the events of 3.
Yes.
Using 3's engine. It was basically like the prototype for 3's engine. So, but yeah, Dream Drop Distance is one of the playable ones.
Okay. Oh, well. Yeah, like I say, I will jump into those with you at some point, because, definitely interested to talk about those with... I mean, I don't think the series is finished from the sound of things, but it's definitely reached a sort of natural break now, with Kingdom Hearts 3 having taken so long to come to market. But,
they've said now that what essentially we have as Kingdom Hearts is one contained what they call the Dark Seeker trilogy, and 3 leaves very clear avenues open for new ones, and there will be new ones with new characters and a new kind of thrust in the story.
Yeah. Trilogy. Yeah,
well, trilogy. Dark Seeker Saga. I don't know what they want to call it. Yeah. All I know is I'm playing Birth by Sleep, and in Birth by Sleep, Xehanort is voice acted by Leonard Nimoy. And
fantastic.
It's awesome, and he's so great, and I'm so sad that he's dead. But weirdly enough, they got Rutger Hauer to voice act him in 3. So they got like another super awesome, respected old dude.
There's some great voice talent in Kingdom Hearts in general.
Oh, I'm blown away.
Yeah, like I remember when the first one came out, and everyone was like really surprised at like who they got to play certain characters. Like there are a lot of some people who were big TV stars at the time. Like they got David Boreanaz from Buffy and Angel to play Squall from Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah,
which is just absolutely perfect casting.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, couldn't do better. Couldn't do better. Yeah, I love it. I'm consistently amazed, because I think we were chatting about this once, but it's like the main bad guy of Kingdom Hearts is Xehanort, or however I'm supposed to pronounce that, because it's the dumbest name in the world. Was originally voice acted by Leonard Nimoy. So his rival, Ericus, whose name is just anagram of square.
Yeah.
So Ericus's whole deal was he was designed to be like the representative character for Squaresoft as a company.
Yeah.
So his fate, like his head, he's designed to be Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy. So his name is an anagram of square, and he's designed to look like Sakaguchi, but he's voice acted by Mark Hamill.
Excellent.
And Nomura said that it was because his dream as a kid was always to have Star Trek versus Star Wars. So literally Mark Hamill and Leonard Nimoy voice act rivals.
That's amazing.
Just to satisfy Nomura's childhood fantasy of Star Trek versus Star Wars. Like, this stuff goes deep, and I'm in love with it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I know people take the piss, but I love it.
I mean, to be fair, I could just be enjoying Birth by Sleep because there's no Goofy and Donald, which is one of the reasons I have difficulty with Kingdom Hearts. So we'll see how I do once I get to actual Kingdom Hearts, but I am enjoying Birth by Sleep quite a bit.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. Anything else you've been playing lately then?
I did get my hands on the Into Create Dragon Marked for Death.
Yes.
I've only dipped my toes in a couple missions. I don't love it, and I don't know how to feel about that. But I haven't played enough of it to really have a formed opinion. But my initial impressions are not great.
That's a shame.
It's quite boring.
Yeah. Well, I'm picking it up at the end of the month, and from everything I've heard from other people who've got it, is that it obviously really shines in multiplayer.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, so we'll definitely give it a go when I get my copy of it, and we'll revisit that and see if you feel differently after that.
What I will say is it is, as expected, drop dead gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Like, just unbelievably beautiful. The environments, the character sprites, it's just the toppest tier of pixel art you can possibly imagine. But in general, what it is it's much like Tribute Games did with Mercenary Kings. It's an attempt to extrapolate the Monster Hunter formula to a side-scroller.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it just feels too empty.
Yeah.
So the stages are massive, and there's very little going on in them.
Right.
And it's like there's too much time in between something interesting happening.
Okay.
Like you'll run for a very long distance and like fight like one enemy, then run again and fight like one enemy. It's very clear that the focus of the game was the boss battles.
Yeah.
Which are quite amazing, but there's so much dead energy between the boss battles that it's very difficult for it to keep my attention.
Right.
Now,
okay.
I don't know if multiplayer mode will ramp up the amount of enemies on screen. Maybe maybe it gets more interesting that way, but what games like Monster Hunter do to alleviate that is Monster Hunter also had kind of the gathering mechanics. So you weren't just looking for the boss, you were also looking for materials, keeping your eye out for gathering points, mining spots. So even during the parts that would have typically been boring in an environment in Monster Hunter, you're still actively engaged in doing something as you look for the boss. There's nothing like that in Dragon. So it feels like there's large quantities of time where you're not doing anything meaningful, and I find myself getting rather bored.
Okay, well, like I say, we'll revisit that when I've got my copy and see if things improve from there.
I mean, I haven't given up on it, certainly, but my initial impressions were just like, I'd rather be playing something else, which is not not the thought you want to be having.
No, definitely not. Okay, good stuff. Anything else?
I did have an opportunity to check out the beta for Mortal Kombat, what is it, 11 now?
11, yeah.
Oh boy, is that a pretty thing. Yeah, if you like if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you won't be disappointed with it, that's for sure. It's gonna be quite nice. What else? I got to play a little bit of Sekiro. Mm-hmm. Shadows Die Twice.
Yeah, you were quite taken with that, weren't you?
I was very impressed. I was very, very impressed with that. I can't wait to buy it in 2 years when there's a complete edition. But I can't speak much to it because I really only watched my friend play it. But it's something special. I mean, it's clearly Tenchu. It's the new Tenchu in all but name. But it basically just takes some of the things that were successful about Dark Souls, but it really has its own identity. All the hard RPG stuff is gone. You know, there's none of the leveling up and stat management and item collecting. Like, you can find upgrades for your prosthetic arm, but like they're game changing mechanical upgrades. Like they're not just like a new sword. So it's very different in the way you progress and the way you approach the world. I know I use this word too much, but it's become big in game design, right? It's like the added verticality to the stages, the ability to jump, which you didn't really have in the Souls games, and the use of the grappling hook, the emphasis on stealth. I mean, Souls fans will recognize certain mechanics instantly, but it's not even worth comparing to the Souls games. It's something entirely different, which is great.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Yeah, I haven't been like super taken with it so far, but it's something I'm willing to give a chance maybe when it's a bit cheaper. Like I've often said that I'd like to revisit the Souls games and take a look at Bloodborne as well, because I know very little about Bloodborne. But yeah, they're games I'd like to check out at some point, but I just haven't sort of really felt the inclination to just yet. But I'm sure I'll get there. There will definitely be a complete collection of Sekiro at some point in the future. So
one of the things that I think may appeal to you about Sekiro that might have put you off from the Bloodborne and the Souls games is that Sekiro actually has a focus on story.
Oh, okay.
So the Souls games are quite famous for their lack of clear narrative, and the idea is that you're in this world, and part of the game of the Souls games was always to piece the narrative together through the things you find and clues within dialogue and item descriptions. It's wonderful. It's something that's wholly unique to those games, but it did put some people off who want character development and a clear story. And Sekiro has that. Good characters with, there's cinematics and story and dialogue, and part of one of the things that you do is like you can go to flashback missions like from your past. Like you'll find out remember that time where like thieves assaulted the Capitol, and then like you can find an item that allows you to pray at the temple and then experience that flashback as playable.
Oh, cool.
So there's really cool stuff and a stronger emphasis on a clearer, more defined narrative, which may appeal to you.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'm open to it. Like I say, it hasn't grabbed me, but that doesn't mean that I'm against it or anything like that. It's just not been sort of high up the priority list or anything.
Sure.
But yeah, sounds interesting.
And let me just say too, like I'm not usually a super graphics guy, but like to see like the historical Japanese mountainsides and stuff rendered in beautiful 4K with like branches swaying in the breeze and like the fields of grasses and stuff, it's pretty breathtaking when you first engage with it.
Cool. Very nice. Okay. All right. So there's several things I want to talk about today, one of which is going to form part of our third section topic discussion, so I'll leave that for now. I do want to give a bit of a highlight to the SNK 40th anniversary collection that I've been playing a fair bit recently as well. So first of all, I do want to say, my god, that game crashes a lot.
Does it?
Yeah,
I hadn't heard that.
I haven't read that anywhere either, but my god, yeah, it crashes so much on my Switch version. It seems to be something to do with like changing over between docked and handheld mode. Because like if I restart my Switch, the problem seems to go away. But yeah, there is a real problem somewhere with that. Thankfully, it never happens in mid-game. It always seems to crash from the menus, or like if you're changing from the game menu to the museum menu and so on. But yeah, that's something that they should probably fix. But aside from that, it's wonderful. Yeah, there's a fantastic lineup of games. The historical stuff in there is incredible. There's these wonderful sort of museum slideshows, they call them, where there's they provide screenshots and the original flyers, and they give a bit of sort of narration and explanation about the context of the game and how it came out at the time, and it's quite amusing to see all the ways that they refer to games of the time without mentioning any specific company names or game names as well. So like when they're talking about Ozma Wars, they're talking about a popular arcade game that was around at the time that had invaders in it, but like they but like they just won't say Space Invaders. But yeah. So there's a really cool selection of different games in there. Some which I haven't explored at all yet. I've mostly been focusing on the shoot 'em up so far, sort of going from their very first one, which was Osmo Wars that I've just mentioned, which was basically a black and white shoot 'em up running on the Space Invaders hardware, but it had a lot more in the way of sort of interesting enemy attack patterns and so on.
Okay.
Also had one of the first health bars in a game as well, so instead of having lives in that, you have a numerical readout of how much energy your ship's got left, which isn't implemented very well, to be perfectly honest, but it was interesting to see them experimenting with something a bit different even that early in the game. The real highlights for me have been sort of the loose trilogy of games that started with Alpha Mission. And so we had Alpha Mission first, then there was Bermuda Triangle, and then World Wars. The last one of those isn't a terribly well-known one at all from what I've read of what Frank Cifaldi has said about this, and they were really pleased to be able to include World Wars in there. And I'm really pleased as well, because World Wars I think is my favourite of the three of them. Alpha Mission is a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up where its main focus is on these armor sets that you can collect. So as you're flying around, you'll find bits of armor, and when you collect 3 of a particular type of armor, it's then stocked in a little inventory at the bottom of the screen, and you can then set that off whenever you want to. And so the different armors, some of them have weapons attached to them, some of them are strictly defensive. There's one called the Thunder Armor that can flatten pretty much anything in the game, including the final boss, in 1 or 2 hits. So that's a good one to save for emergencies. But yeah, that's a really interesting mechanic that is again quite different from other things that were around at the time. Very different from like your standard power-up system. Alpha Mission also has power downs as well, so it has these sort of brown power-ups that have the letters reversed on them. So they'll do things like power your shots down and that sort of thing, and
Why?
sort of get rid
Why?
just to annoy you. And I mean, they're quite obvious to see. Because they're a completely different colour to the other ones, and the letters are reversed, but they're just something else to avoid. That sort of adds another layer of things to dodge on top of it. Because I mean, it's not like a super frantic shoot 'em up or anything like that, because I mean, none of them really were at that particular era in time. But yeah, it gives you an additional thing to think about, and sort of try some interesting things. Bermuda Triangle is really interesting because it's a game where you're flying a very large ship. And it's not like a bullet hell game where you have quite a large ship but a very small hitbox. No, you've just got a large ship in this that can take multiple hits. So you have an energy bar in that one. As well as being your health is also your weapon power. So sort of the better condition your ship is in, the more powerful its shots are, and so on.
Makes sense.
It was a game that used SNK's loop lever system as well, so you could twist the joystick and fire in 8 directions, independently of the direction you were moving. You can get these little ships that sort of escort you as well, and put those in different formations, and the different formations do different things when you fire, and are at different power levels and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a really interesting one. And then World Wars is probably the most traditional in terms of structure and design, but it's just a really good shoot 'em up, a really good sort of traditional top-down, vertically scrolling shoot 'em up. Again, it uses the loop lever, so you can fire shots in 8 directions. You have sort of Xevious-style missiles that drop towards the ground as well as your shot. They only fire in front of you, while you can shoot in the different directions, and so there's a nice mix of different ground targets and things. You have this sort of building up power system as you go through, and that powers up both your shots and your bombs, and they, rather than just sort of firing a wider spread, they actually do different things. So like the second level of bombs is like they do a cluster bomb thing where they fire in a line up the screen, and then the top level of the bombs is they just do a large explosion on the ground. So you have to sort of be ready for the different ways the weapons are going to react as you play through. But yeah, they're just really fun games, and I've been enjoying them a lot. I've written about them over on MoeGamer recently. Yeah, it's just a real pleasure to explore some of SNK's lesser known stuff that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, because I mean, SNK is reasonably well known these days, but primarily for its fighting games, maybe some Neo Geo stuff, but primarily its fighting games. And so there's so much stuff there that just doesn't get talked about or people don't know about. And like, it's been a real pleasure to discover stuff like Psycho Soldier and that kind of thing. Psycho Soldier is a great game that I will talk a bit more about when I've played it a little bit more. But yeah, suffice to say for now that like the song in that game is wonderful, and the English speech and just the fact that again it's doing something really different to other games that I've seen at the time. Yeah, SNK. Early era SNK, clearly one of the most creative developers out there, and it's just a real pleasure to discover their work. So even with the issues that this collection seems to have, I don't know if those are present on the PS4 version or not, but even with the issues this collection has got, then it's definitely a worthwhile purchase. So
yeah, I do plan on getting the PS4 version. Now that it's been confirmed that the PS4 version has everything on the disc,
yes,
all 20 plus games.
Yes, so for those of you who've not been following this saga, the Switch version of the collection had, I think it was 13 games just on the cartridge, and they released the remaining 11 through a combination of free updates, and then they had to put a couple out as free DLC because they bumped up the game's age rating due to a bit of gore in them.
Oh, it was like Beastbusters or whatever, right?
Yeah, it was Beastbusters and Search and Rescue. Both of those are quite gory. So
Beastbusters is awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, for the Switch version, you have to download those bits separately, which obviously raises the old archival question again. But the PS4 version, they've confirmed that the disc comes with all the games on it. So if you want a complete copy that hopefully won't be prone to update issues and that sort of thing, then that's the one to plump for, as long as you can live without the handheld thing. I went for the Switch version because it's fun to play World Wars at lunchtime. That, to be honest, is pretty much everything I've been playing lately, aside from what I'm going to talk about in the third segment. So, is there anything else you want to bring up before we move on?
No, I think that's it. I've grabbed some stuff very recently, so hopefully I'll have some more cool stuff to talk about next time we record. But yeah, like I said, I'm pretty immersed in Kingdom Hearts right now. And Birth by Sleep alone, you have to beat it with all 3 characters before you get the full story, and I'm at 10 hours with one of the characters, and so it's going to take me a while.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, okay, let's leave that there then, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about our main topic for today. So see you in a moment.
Power up. Emergency. Operation miscarried. Zig damaged. Unable control. Ship return.
Welcome back. For our third segment today, we wanted to talk about our favourite RPG battle system. So there's a lot of things we want to talk about with RPGs, so there'll be a number of episodes on related subjects at some point, and probably even about battle systems at some point. But today we just wanted to kind of give a bit of love to some of our favourite ones from over the years, or some particularly noteworthy or interesting ones we've found. So the first one I wanted to bring up then is the current game that I'm covering on MoeGamer.net, which is Death End Request from Compile Heart. So this one of the most striking things about this game when we first heard about it was the battle system. As I believe you described it to me as that game where the battle system is billiards. Yeah,
and it only gets crazier from there, eh? That's not even the most remarkable part.
Yeah, so I mean, calling it a battle system that is billiards is maybe not quite accurate in some ways, but it certainly is a very interesting battle system that I've been really, really, really enjoying engaging with as I've been playing through the game. So, kind of the core of it is this system called the Triact system, which is just a fancy word for saying that you can do 3 things on your turn. So there are a few restrictions on that though. So the 3 actions you pick, you have to trigger them all from the same position. So you have to be in the same place in the arena for all 3 actions, and you have to have enough points to spend on doing all of those actions before you start. So what you can't do is you can't set off a powerful move, drink a potion as your second action, and then do the powerful move again. You need enough skill points to be able to do everything in one go.
Makes sense.
So there is this strong emphasis on area of effect of your various skills. So if you've played the earlier Neptunia games, it's a similar kind of idea to that, because most of the sort of basic attacks you used in the Neptunia system, they had an area of effect according to what kind of weapon you had. So, for example, Vert's spears tended to have sort of like a long reach in front of her, so she could hit several enemies in a row. The characters who use swords, they tended to have a sort of arc shape in front of them, so that they could hit things in kind of a sweep in front of them. There were ranged characters who could only hit things that were sort of a specific distance ahead of them and that kind of thing. I'm waving my arms around while I'm saying this, and I know no one can see me, so yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
but anyway, yeah, so
that's
strong
one
emphasis.
thing Compile Heart's always done well, or
yes,
whatever.
Yes. So AoE has always been a very strong part of the Neptunia system. Fairy Fencer F, which a lot of people compared to Neptunia, actually didn't use AoEs. Instead, that used sort of a focus on positioning and attack types. So that was a little bit different. But yeah, for the most part, the Neptunia series, which has kind of been their flagship series for the longest time, has had this strong focus. And Death End Request is not the same battle system as Neptunia, but this element in particular is very recognizable from it. The different moves you can use, there are 3 different elements. There is Moon, Sun, and Star, and they have a triangular relationship. So each character is a particular element, and each enemy is a particular element. And that means that most of the characters' skills will be of the element that they are. But as you progress through the game, some of them will unlock skills from outside their own element, so they can cover several different bases. But they will always embody that particular element. So, like if a star element enemy attacks your moon element enemy character, they will always take additional damage. So there's no way of sort of mitigating that. And then beyond that, there are physical and magical attacks as well. So each skill that you use is either physical or magical, and it has a particular element and a particular power level and a particular area of effect. So sort of effective combat in this is making use of all those elements to kind of get rid of the enemies as efficiently as you possibly can. Strong emphasis on position, so you can move around the arena freely on your turn, so there's no limitation on how far you can move like there was in Neptunia. So you can position yourself tactically, and with there being such a strong focus on AoEs, that's very important. And then there's this knockback system, which is where the billiards comparison came from. And so if you do either 3 basic attacks, which become pretty much useless by about an hour into the game, if you do 3 basic attacks or certain specific skills, they have a knockback attribute on them, which means that after you have done your 3 actions, you will get a free 4th attack, which is just a 4th basic attack, but it has a very strong knockback on the enemy. So it will send them flying backwards with the distance that they go according to how heavy the enemy is. And in the process, if they bounce off another enemy or the wall of the arena, they will take additional damage. If you knock them into one of your ally will get a free attack on them. And as you knock them through these things called field bugs that are on the field, they will also take damage from those and clear out the field bugs as well. And the field bugs are one of the more interesting things about the system, because they have several functions really. So first of all, they get in the way, because if you step on one, you will take damage, but you will also restore some of your skill points. So there's a bit of a sort of risk and reward thing going on there. As the game progresses, you start seeing different types of them on the field. So certain ones will restore more skill points but do less damage to you. So those are obviously ones that you might want to step on before your turn, because that's a way of restoring yourself for free without putting yourself at too much risk. There's certain ones that will cause status effects, so some will poison you, but some will actually have positive effects as well. So some will increase your speed, which also increases your accuracy. Some will increase your magic attack power. Some will increase your defensive power. Some will make you completely invincible for a turn. But in the process of making you completely invincible, they also do a hell of a lot of damage to you. So you have to make sure you have enough hit points to take that hit to become invincible. But after that, if you're invincible, you can then completely step on any of the other bugs without taking any extra damage. So yeah, there's some really interesting tactical considerations there. The other purpose that they have is that when you clear out more than half of them on the field, you can do certain things. There's 3 different things you can do at this point. So you can do something called code jacking, which allows you to manipulate both the battlefield and certain elements about the enemies. So you can buff your party, or debuff the enemies, or turn the remaining field bugs into a specific type. So, for example, if the field is full of those annoying poisonous ones, you can turn them all into ones that restore your skill points. There's a summon system where the major bosses of the game that you defeated, you can then summon them onto the field, and they will then tank damage from enemies for you for a couple of turns. They'll get a couple of attacks off as well, but they're not very effective attacks. Their main use is firstly them tanking damage, and also each of them has got a passive effect as well. So, for example, one will increase all of your party members' maximum skill points so they can do more of their more powerful moves. One of them will reduce the weight of all the enemies, so when you do a knockback on them, they'll fly further. And there's various other ones as you go through as well. So they're very useful. And then sort of the big unique selling point is this genre change system. And these are basically interactive special attacks. So there's 6 in total that you gradually unlock over the course of the game. And what that means is that rather than taking a normal turn, a character then switches to what looks like a different style of game, and then you have to interact with that particular type of game in order to deal as much damage as you can. So the third-person shooter one you start with, for example, you have a number of bullets that are according to how many skill points that character has got remaining. When you fire at an enemy, you do damage when you hit them. You also do a big knockback on them. So you can either try and sort of rapid fire them into a corner, or you can take your time over your shots and kind of ping them around the arena a bit and try and get them into different positions. There's a slot machine, which may have positive or negative effects on both you and your party, with the effects being more powerful according to how much of your current character's hit points you gamble. There's a puzzle one, which is mostly about sweeping enemies through squares on the ground, and you do more damage if you sweep them through a specific colour of squares. What else is there? There's the fighting game one, which is basically you have a certain number of attacks that you can use. So stronger attacks are worth sort of more of this meter that you can use. Then there's the billiards one, which actually is billiards, where these black holes appear around the edges of the arena, and if you knock an enemy into one of those black holes, then that will do massive amount of damage to them. And then one that I haven't unlocked yet, because you unlock it very late in the game, is sort of inspired by action games and platformers, so you actually have to sort of jump on the heads of enemies. And so yeah, I mean it's not quite as radical a thing as they might sort of make out in the marketing material. It doesn't change the game into a third-person shooter, but it is basically an interactive special attack that has the potential to do a lot of damage. And yeah, it's a real lot of fun to do these different things. Different ones are useful in different circumstances. Like the billiards one is really useful if you've got a bunch of enemies that are very strong but spread out around the arena, so you can't hit them with an area effect. So yeah, that's really interesting. And then sort of the final piece of the puzzle is how all your characters learn their new skills. So rather than learning them through leveling up, there's this system in here that's kind of vaguely SaGa inspired almost. They call it Flash Drive. And what this is you learn new moves by using particular combinations of your existing ones.
Oh, okay.
So for example, a really simple one, the one that teaches you at the start of the game is just like you use 2 of your basic healing spell, you'll learn the next level up of healing spell, for example. But later in the game, you're sort of having to combine 2 quite different skills together to produce the third one. You learn different elements for the different characters and so on. So there's quite a lot of different skills for the characters to learn, and it just really encourages you to experiment with the different things. You learn more skills than the characters can have equipped at once as well, so you have to make some interesting decisions over which of your abilities you're going to take into combat with you. So are you going to take the ones that you haven't used very much, so which might unlock some more skills for you, or are you just going to take your most powerful loadout of things and hope that they're going to be enough for the challenges that are ahead of you? So yeah, it's really, really enjoyable. It's one of Compile Heart's most interesting systems that I've seen to date, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, very impressed with that.
Yeah, it sounds like a really neat game. Just everything you've described on your articles on your site, just besides the combat, the fact that it meshes the mystery visual novel elements with the traditional RPG elements, it just sounds like a really unique title overall.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I'm quite worried that it's going to be forgotten.
It will be.
It almost certainly will be completely forgotten, which is why I wanted to make a point of covering it, just because there's so much interesting stuff going on here, narratively, structurally, mechanically, that it deserves a bit of love, I think. So, and it's got some lovely art as well. So if you liked the art for Trillion, God of Destruction, it's the same artist who did the art on that as well. So it's got
Mary
quite a nice.
Skelter too, right? Same artist.
I think so. Yes, there's certainly some similarities in character designs in a lot of ways. So
I really love the character design in Trillion. I didn't play Trillion; the type of game just didn't appeal to me. But I really love the character design in that.
Yeah. So that's my first one. My next one is another Compile Heart one. So I'll let you talk for a bit before I move on to that one.
Okay. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about today, as pretty much as soon as we conceived of mechanically interesting favorite battle sequence systems, I would in my head it was already so we're gonna do a Grandia episode.
Yeah.
So kind of tying everything back to what you were saying about Death End Request. It may not be the first game to ever do this, but Grandia was the first RPG I can remember playing where character positioning and awareness of space on the field was important. And so, like I said, there may have been games that did it prior. I'm sure there's some weird PC Western RPG that isn't my bag that I never played that did it 10 years before Grandia. But Grandia is the first game I ever turn-based RPG I ever played where your characters were standing in relation to the enemy mattered, meaning they weren't just three people standing in a line next to each other.
Yeah.
And then it just goes on from that. It's besides the positioning of their characters, their spacing and location of the enemies is important. Grandia was also one of the first games to take the active time elements that Final Fantasy was famous for and put them on a bar on the screen where I could actually see the time relationships between when enemies would act and when I would get to act.
Yes.
So that bar basically forms the core element of Grandia's combat, right? So in Grandia, you see this bar. One side of the bar shows little indicators of your characters. One side of the bar shows indicators of where each enemy is. The real hook of Grandia's combat system then comes into play is that you have two different types of attacks. You have a strong attack or you have a weak attack. A weak attack is pretty much just a standard physical attack. It executes in a reasonable amount of time. It does damage. You're done. You can also gamble on a strong attack. Now, a strong attack takes longer to wind up. So it takes more time to do, which increases the possibility that an enemy might hit you before you can pull it off. It does more damage, and it also, if it connects, moves the enemy's time back.
Yes.
So it actually creates more time in between the enemy hitting you again.
Yeah.
So clever application of Grandia's attack system. If you're really on top of your game, you can create scenarios where you are attacking and you're just juggling that enemy on the time meter and he doesn't even get to attack you.
Yeah. But you can actually interrupt enemies out of charging up their attacks as well, can't you? Because there's like a part of the bar that says com, which is where you and the enemies choose their actions, and then there's act at the far end, and there's a period of time between those two things, and variable speed according to the different actions. So
which is also where they can disrupt your heavy attack if they hit you. That's where the gamble comes in. Yeah, so I mean that's Grandia. Just a really interesting system where timing and spatial relationships were important. And it was the first game that really made me think that way about RPG combat, thinking about more than just making menu selections, and worrying about numbers. They're all good. It's a game of diminishing returns. I think the common consensus is that Grandia 1 is certainly the best. Grandia 2, great, but not so good. Grandia 3, people forget it exists, but it's still a good game. I love the fourth spin-off game, Grandia Extreme, which I think a lot of people don't like. So Grandia Extreme is great for people who love the combat of Grandia, because it essentially was the developer of Grandia Game Arts saying, like, people love the combat of Grandia. Let's really focus on the mechanical elements of Grandia and less on the narrative elements. So Grandia Extreme is not a numbered entry, because what it does is it's just a dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
Set in with Grandia mechanics. Like, there's a hub town and different dungeons you go to explore, and just fight and fight and fight and fight and grind and grind and grind and grind. So it's everything you love about a dungeon crawler, but with Grandia combat.
I was going to say, that sounds great.
It's delightful, but it really got shit on when it came out, because it wasn't a big sprawling RPG, and I think everyone at that point wanted Grandia 3, because it came out in between 2 and 3, and it wasn't the game people wanted, so that automatically made it a bad game.
Yeah.
Right, but it's quite good. It's a really cool dungeon crawler, and if you love Grandia's combat, as I do, it's an opportunity to engage with Grandia's combat without getting weighed down by cutscenes and super narrative heavy stuff. So, so that, I don't know, that's Grandia. It just, I think, widely respected as one of the best combat systems.
Yeah,
to grace the genre.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a long-standing favourite of mine. I didn't play Grandia 1 until much later than I played Grandia 2. But yeah, both fantastic games. I wasn't originally going to mention this, but just you mentioning it there just reminded me that Blue Reflection actually had a very Grandia-esque combat system. Less about the sort of positioning side of things, but it certainly had a very similar sort of time meter mechanic, and there were a lot of there were a lot of moves that involved manipulating that time meter, not either knocking it back or sort of triggering an attack, which would then cause several markers to appear on the time meter that showed when sort of the attack would do things, if you like. So yeah, that was quite an interesting implementation of that similar idea. So if you like Grandia's combat, then certainly Blue Reflection's combat has some very similar elements in there as well that are worth looking at. Okay, so the next game I wanted to bring up, like I say, is another Compile Heart game. Very different in execution to Death End Request and Neptunia and that sort of thing. It was actually their first PS4 game, if I remember correctly, which is Omega Quintet.
Oh, yeah. That's the one with the idol theme, right?
Yes, that's right. So Omega Quintet is a post-apocalyptic RPG in which sort of the last hope of humanity is in this group of idols who also happen to be really good at hitting things with hammers. With that in mind, thematically the game is very much about performance. It's sort of suggested to you that all the battles you're doing are being broadcast to people around the world, so there's sort of commentary on them as you're going through, from sort of your manager, who is sort of announcing things to one and saying, "Oh wow, look how amazing they did there," or something like that. So and that spills across into the mechanics as well. There's a very strong emphasis mechanically on showmanship. I
love it. It almost sounds like a fusion of Devil May Cry's style system on a turn-based structure. Yeah, it kind of is that. It's all about doing the most spectacular things possible, and so there's several things that are in that system that allow you to do that. So one of the main ones is this system called harmonics, which basically means instead of all your characters taking their turns separately, all of the characters who are adjacent to each other on the turn order, they all take their turns at the same time, and so that and in Omega Quintet, each character has a certain number of action points per turn, which is how many things they can do. And so what you want to try and do is get everyone lined up in the turn order, do harmonics when they've got the maximum possible number of action points, and then do as many things as possible at once. Because it's sort of like the longer combo you do, the more damage you do. Certain combinations of things naturally follow on to each other. So like
most of the elemental moves in particular, there'll be like a little marker in the corner of the screen that says, oh, you should try and use this element next after this one, and if you do, the damage will gradually build up and do debuffs on the enemies and that sort of thing. So there's a very strong emphasis on sort of almost choreographed routines, so sort of a specific combination and order of things that is the most effective way of doing things. And so I remember one of I think the page that got the most ever hits on my old personal blog before I started MoeGamer was I wrote an article on how to win at Omega Quintet, because there's by the end of the game, when you've unlocked all the abilities, there's this one specific combination of things that just absolutely decimates everything in the game. But it's a really complicated sequence of things. I will see if I can find it right now, actually. It basically involved doing a sequence of elemental attacks that debuffed the enemy so much that by the time you moved on to the physical attacks, you were just doing massive amounts of damage.
Oh, okay.
Because if you just did one attack, you wouldn't seem to do very much damage at all. But if you sort of prefaced it with all of these elemental skills, because the elemental skills weren't very powerful by themselves, but they did have a lot of debuffs attached to them. That's what you did. So, oh god, I won't read out the whole thing because it's incredibly long. But yeah, it's basically each character does one of each element, and then they each do sort of one of their main weapon skills as well. And then you can further buff that damage by using what's called, I think it was called live concert mode or something like that, which changes the battle mode to all the girls singing while you're fighting the enemies. So awesome. There's this ridiculous sort of J-pop song going on in the background while you're kicking the shit out of these giant sort of slobbering monsters with tentacles. It's just fantastic, and quite difficult, and by no means a perfect game, because there's this really annoying mechanic in Omega Quintet called order break, where the enemy will just interrupt your turn and do something, but there is always sort of a specific trigger to that. So you can learn those things, but when you're trying to get through the game, that can be quite annoying. But yeah, it's certainly, again, a very interesting game, and one that's very different from what I've previously described here as well. So that's definitely worth checking out. I also found that quite interesting for its emphasis on overkilling enemies as well. So we've we've sort of seen overkill mechanics and stuff like Final Fantasy X, I think was the first time I saw that, where sort of you do much more damage than you need to defeat an enemy, and that will give you additional bonuses. So Omega Quintet very much put a strong focus on that by when you'd emptied an enemy's hit point bar, any additional damage you did started to fill it up again. And if you completely refilled the enemy's hit point bar with all that extra damage, so basically put them on the negative maximum hit point total, you would get a huge bonus at the end of that. And so sort of getting the most experience and skill points and various other progression elements in the game was dependent on you doing that as much as possible. And again, that tied in with the whole showmanship thing. So like, your battles were being broadcast, so obviously you want to defeat the enemies as spectacularly as possible. You want to decimate them, do as much damage as possible, so everyone is feeling inspired by your skills and that sort of thing. And so yeah, it just really ties in nicely with the theme of things, but it's a lot of fun to engage with as well. So yeah, that's a relatively recent favourite of mine that I wanted to highlight. Okay, what else you got?
Well, it kind of all ties in with something that has come up in a couple of the games you've mentioned so far. Idea Factory and Compile Heart, they really like these RPGs with combo systems.
Yes.
Where you're not just choosing attack or a spell, but you're using a number of skill points to choose a combination of moves to execute in a certain turn. And I've always had a soft spot for games that did that. And going back to kind of earlier RPGs that are some of the earliest ones I can remember to do that was the original Xenogears.
Yes, definitely.
So the original Xenogears had that emphasis on these amazing martial arts combos that you built by, you had 3 moves tied to X, circle, and triangle or whatever, and then you would piece together a combo move based on the amount of skill points you had available, and if you chose the right combination of attacks in the right order, you would also trigger this like flashy finisher. and it was wonderful. And now I can't remember what game did it first. I'm sure I could look it up on Wikipedia and get dates, but I've always loved the Legend of Legaia series for that. Mm-hmm. And that's a series I don't hear talked about very often. There's only two
I don't
games.
know well.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just that. It's like, I always thought of Legend of Legaia as like if they wanted to make like a Dragon Ball RPG. It's just like there's a very specific narrative emphasis in the Legaia series on the fact that these characters are martial artists. So the combat plays into that. And what it really is if you ever played Final Fantasy VI, and you remember Sabin's Blitz mechanics?
Yeah.
Where you would input literally Street Fighter commands in down, toward, and then the attack, and that would trigger a different special move. So basically the Legend of Legaia series extrapolates that to the entire combat system. So like every time you attack, you're doing that. High attack, low attack, leg sweep. And then based on, as your characters level up, they will get more skill points to do more moves in an attack. And then the order that you put in those commands may also trigger a flashy finisher.
Yeah.
Just, like a giant fireball or a flaming spinning uppercut. It's all very fighting game inspired because the input commands often mimic what you would expect from a fighting game. So like, in a lot of classic fighting games, like the ultimate special for a character is like start it back, a full down scroll of back toward, down, like back, away, down, toward, then like 3 attacks at once, right? Like that full that full bottom sweep of the circle. And so like when you get to the very end game of the Legaia games, like that's what you've got to input that, and then like you get to do like the massive. And I love those games. I won't get into the narrative, but the first one in particular has a very interesting setting and narrative that to this day is totally unlike anything I've ever experienced. But those games had really interesting combat systems based on martial arts combos, and I've never really seen the like, except for in Xenogears and later on these Compile Heart games kind of resurrected that style of combat in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, current Compile Heart stuff, the way they handle combos is a little bit different, but it's worth mentioning the first ever Neptunia game in this regard as well, because the combat in that was actually surprisingly inspired by Xenogears.
Yes,
I don't know if that was a deliberate decision or anything, but the that used the same. You assign an attack to a button, and then the different combos you put out are according to the different order that you press the buttons in. And one thing I really, really loved about that game was just spending time in the menus, figuring out the order you should put your moves in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very satisfying.
That felt like a significant, almost like a puzzle to unravel, because you thought, right, okay, so if I put these 3 moves in and then put my last move as a switch to the character in the backline, they can then do this combination of moves and then switch back to the first character, and then they can do this, and then they can break the enemy's guard with this. And it was incredibly satisfying. And the original Neptunia has lots of sort of clunky elements and so on, but that part of things was a real highlight for me. Mm-hmm. I remember playing it and thinking this is kind of like Xenogears, and that was really cool. That made me very happy.
Yeah. So Xenosaga continued that from Xenogears, and then Xenosaga 2, which is the one nobody likes, but it still had some really interesting stuff going on. Introduced a lot of the stuff we would come to love in Xenoblade, which I think a lot of people forget about this, but Xenosaga 2 introduced the like the stun lock and then the uppercut and the down mechanic.
Oh, right.
That all comes from Xenosaga 2. And everyone forgets that. Everyone's like, oh, Xenoblade introduced this and it's amazing. No, Xenosaga 2 did. And everyone hated it because it was way too complicated. It was like super ahead of its time. But the whole like upset and down mechanic all came from Xenosaga 2, and it was all tied to the way you structured those combos.
Yeah.
So just in general, Monolithsoft were always like super innovative when it came to combat mechanics.
Yeah, well, you're quite big on Baten Kaitos as well, aren't you?
Yes, and I have that on my list too. And it's funny because you also mentioned Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. That's another card based RPG. But so Baten Kaitos is a Monolithsoft RPG series. There's only 2 of them. They're on the GameCube. I want desperately for this series to get revived because I think it's a beautiful fit for the Switch. But in Baten Kaitos, there's no traditional equipment, no items, no nothing. There's only cards. And everything you do in combat is driven by a collectible card game. It's cool because some people don't like it, but to me it's really interesting because, so many times in RPGs, once you really figure the mechanics out and the flow of battle, you really start to lock in on your standard strategies. Like, these are my go-to moves, these are my go-to sequences of doing things. Baten Kaitos doesn't let you do that. Because your capabilities in battle are totally dictated by what you draw in your hand. So, if you don't draw a shield, you don't get to defend. Yeah. God forbid the hand you pull is like 4 apples and a dagger. Then you can't heal. You can't attack with your sword. You can't. It's so like what it really does is forces you to think on the fly in a way that RPGs generally don't do. Yeah. Because you get caught in a rut with how you perform. So Baten Kaitos really forces you to understand its mechanics deeply and be able to adapt on the fly to situations that are presented to you via the card mechanic. And I just thought that was really, really neat and really, really different. And I haven't really seen its like since. Yeah.
Yeah, there've been a few sort of card-based systems over the years, haven't there? Was it Phantasy Star Online 3 that did the card system as well?
Yeah, but see, Phantasy Star Online 3 it was a card game.
Oh right, yeah, I've never actually played that one. I haven't.
Phantasy Star Online 3 was very much like whenever you were in a fight, it was the card game.
Okay.
So it would create it would zoom out, and then the stadium would turn into a grid, and I think it was, I want to say 6x6. Like you get either 6x6 or 9x9, whatever. But it gridded the stadium out, and your cards were if you played the side that controlled monsters, your cards were the monsters you would summon and move on the grid. If you played on the good guy side, your cards were your equipment. But there wasn't any illusions with Phantasy Star 3 Card Revolution. It was a card game.
It just was a card game.
Yeah. So what Baten Kaitos is doing very differently is Baten Kaitos is a traditional RPG with battle sequences, and the way in which you engage with those battle sequences just happens to be with card mechanics.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a very fine line, but it is a difference.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories is that way. It's a card-based battle sequence system, but I don't have any experience with it, so I can't speak to it. I think that game came before Baten Kaitos, technically. Date-wise, I think it predates Baten Kaitos.
Yeah, it was because it was a GBA game originally. I've actually still got the GBA version somewhere.
Yes, it was.
I did not get that game at all when I first played it, and kind of hated it. But I'm very keen to revisit it now that I kind of understand different types of mechanics and things a bit better.
Right.
Because I can see that being a really interesting one to fiddle around with.
Yeah. So. Did you have any others you were interested? I just kind of had broad kind of categories that I kind of thought were interesting.
I've got one more specific one I want to bring up, which, I mean, it's kind of debatable if this is technically an RPG at all, because it's probably more of a strategy game, but it's got enough RPG elements in there that I'm going to mention it anyway, and this is also the most obscure game on my list, which is Aselia the Eternal, which is a kind of a hybrid of visual novel and RPG and strategy game. This game is really interesting in that it just does not absolutely does not give a shit about what is sort of quote good balance between narrative components and gameplay elements, because there's 6 hours of visual novel story before you do any fighting in the game at all. which will almost certainly put a lot of people off. But when you get into the strategy game side of things, it's so good. It's so good. Basically, the way Aselia the Eternal works is it all takes place on a kind of node-based map, which represents kind of the kingdom or the area that you're in doing the mission in. So there's kind of specific routes between different areas, and you have up to 4 different squads of people that you can move around, and each squad's got 3 members. And there's 3 types of characters. There are attackers, defenders, and support characters. And each of those, as you might expect, they have their own particular function in the party. But what's interesting in this game is that the order of your characters is important. So the order that you put them in your party affects what they are going to do in combat, because it's almost got sort of what I call hands-off combat, in that you don't specifically pick commands for your characters. They do stuff according to what order you've put them in their little squad, and the actual lineup of abilities that they've got. So different characters have different abilities, and you can ensure that they're going to do a particular ability by what position you put them in the party.
It almost sounds like what you were talking about with Neptunia. It's like the real joy here is the pre-work you do before battle in order to engineer these things to happen the way you want.
Yeah, it's all about the preparation in this game. So that's where sort of a big part of the strategic element comes in. So attackers are mainly designed for sort of putting in the front slot of the party, because they will then run forward and they will hit an enemy. That's like their sort of most basic function. Defenders, if you put them in the middle slot, they will sort of they'll basically tank. From that point, they will sort of shield everyone else. They will take damage for other people. Support characters, again, you put them in the back row and they will do like ranged attacks. But then you can do things like, sort of, if you put the support character in a different slot, they might do a healing spell. If you put them in the front slot, they might do something different again. So it's not necessarily as cut and dry as putting the attack in the front, the defender in the middle, and the support at the back. You have to kind of switch them around according to the challenges that you're facing at a particular time. And there's other interesting elements in here. So there's permadeath in this game. So the game ends straight away if one of the major characters is killed. But there's also a fairly substantial kind of supporting cast of characters who they can just die. And like if they die in combat, then you just don't get them back. So there's that to bear in mind. And I think probably the most interesting thing about this is they all have a stat called Mind. And mind represents the mental trauma of combat. And so as the more powerful attacks they do will have a stronger impact on their mind stat. So like if they are being very aggressive and like killing loads of people, they basically end up going bonkers. Just because they're just being used to kill things, and like anyone who is just sort of forced to do that is gonna go crazy eventually. And so if you want to engage with the other side of the game, the visual novel side of things, you have to keep an eye on this stat, because certain events will happen with these characters, but only if their mind stat is above a certain point. So like if you've been traumatizing your entire squad by just making them murder everything in sight, then everyone is going to be like sitting alone in their rooms dribbling to themselves, and they just won't want to talk to you. And so you've got to really bear that in mind as well. So yeah, that's a really interesting element where they kind of blend a mechanical aspect with the story side of things again, and again that ties in with the overall narrative of what's going on in the game as well. Again, I won't get too into that now, because it's an interesting game that people should experience for themselves. But yeah, the way that ties in with between the mechanics and the element and the narrative elements works really nicely. So. Yeah, that's a really interesting one that I'd like to revisit at some point, and I've actually got the sequel on my shelf as well that I'd like to take a look at some point. Again, that's more of a follow-up rather than a direct sequel, I think. There was also another game that I think is by the same people. It certainly has some sort of connection to Aselia the Eternal. That's called Yumina the Ethereal. That's more of a traditional dungeon crawling RPG, but the difference in that one is that all the combat is based on like rhetoric and arguments.
Interesting.
I I don't know how it works because I haven't played it at all, but I know people who like Yumi the Ethereal, they really love it. So I'm looking forward to trying that one at some point. It's just not one I've got round to yet, but yeah, I know there's a very strong emphasis on like arguing and that sort of thing in that one. So
it's the internet, the game.
basically, yeah. Yeah, so those are all the specifics I wanted to talk about. So you said you had some general things you wanted to
talk just about,
so fire away.
In general, I think everyone has a pretty big soft spot for games that have a some kind of active element in the combat. So immediately I go to like when Mario RPG came out.
Yeah.
Right, and all the Mario RPGs after that, Paper Mario, the Alpha Dream, handheld Mario RPGs, they all have that delicious mechanic where you don't just attack, but if you press A right before Mario jumps on his head, you get an extra bonus point of damage. Or if you press it when you defend, you shave another point off. So I really love games like that. So I'm not just sitting there watching. I'm actively engaged with controller in hand. I think any game that does that is really cool. I know loads of people still to this day pine for a new Legend of Dragoon. And Legend of Dragoon did that quite well with the timing on the attacks. I very fondly remember that. And in a similar vein to this, a series that I'm just beginning to explore, and I know you're quite fond of, is... games that have roulette-style mechanics. So I'm thinking, of course, about Shadow Hearts most directly, which had that in-combat roulette wheel that you were in charge of pausing with the appropriate timing to not only get the success of your attacks, but sometimes to do a combo. If you were doing a special move with 3 hits, you had to nail all 3 of them. And then, of course, the joy of the Judgment Wheel? Is that what it's called?
Judgment Ring.
Ring. So like that also works outside of combat, right? So like if you're trying to lock pick a chest or something, you have to do it too. But it's everything in combat is based on your success or failure with this Judgment Ring.
I found that really interesting because it was a completely skill based way of handling what would be a dice roll in a tabletop game.
Yes.
And so, like you mentioned, the lock picking stuff there. Yeah, that's a great example. Like in D&D, if you're trying to pick a lock, you would roll a dice and apply modifiers to that. In Shadow Hearts, you have the Judgment Ring, and the better you are at something, the larger the areas are on the Judgment Ring, making it easier for you to hit the right things. The other interesting thing about the Judgment Ring is that after a while, it becomes a matter of muscle memory and rhythm more than keeping an eye on the screen. So after a while, you will learn that a certain character's attack has a rhythm, ba ba ba, and so you will know that after you hit that attack button, that is the rhythm you're going to have to tap out on your X button for it to go off effectively. And yeah, it's one of those games where once you've been playing it for a while, you'll just really get into the zone with that, and you'll know all these different rhythms, and you'll be hearing them in your sleep. And yeah, it's almost like another layer of almost characterization, I guess. I mean, I know it's a really weird thing to say, but yeah, just each character having their own unique rhythms for their different attacks and so on. It's another way of immediately identifying them in the game. And yeah, Shadow Hearts is wonderful, and everyone should play it, and it needs to come back, or at least be remastered.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that'll ever happen, because Saknoth is dead.
Nope.
But, let's see, what else did I think was cool? Oh, I think, I won't talk about it much, because A, I don't understand it yet, and B, I know we were planning on doing a focused episode on it, but Unlimitedsoga also has a roulette wheel as part of the combat and as part of environmental navigation and basically dice checks for things like treasure chests and trap survival. But it's much more complicated than the Judgment Ring because like the roulette in Unlimitedsoga will also just say like fuck you sometimes. Like you'll like get the thing you want and then it'll be like nope. Like Unlimitedsoga is a hate monster and and 15 years later, I still don't quite understand how to play it, but I want to. So, like,
oh yeah, definitely.
I'm making
desperately.
It's like one of my great life projects to like fully understand Unlimited Saga.
I think I've shown it to you before. There's a guy on YouTube who's done like a 12-part tutorial series.
Yeah, it's like his entire channel is just teaching people how to play Unlimited Saga.
Yeah, I would love to know how to play that game, just because there's so much interesting stuff. And I mean, we'll talk more about this when we actually do an episode on it. But yeah, just the way it really runs with the tabletop angle is just fascinating. Just because that even extends to, like, in combat, you have a bewildering array of choices of things to do in combat, and that's just a reflection of, like, when you're playing D&D, it's just the DM turning to you and going, "Well, what do you do?"
Yeah,
and it's not picking from a list of abilities unless you're playing D&D 4th edition. Burn. Yeah, it's just deciding what you're going to do, and it's not just I attack that monster over there. It's like no, I whip out my dagger and I slash it across their throat, and they leap on the table, and yeah. So I mean, it's not quite that in Unlimited Saga, but just like the array of options there is obviously trying to channel that side of things.
And I don't think people really, people hate Unlimited Saga. Like, it's rare to find a game that people hate as much as Unlimited Saga, and that's part of the reason I love it so much. But like, I don't think people understand that, like, the obtuse nature of Unlimited Saga is directly tied to the fact that it's attempting to emulate the experience of a tabletop game. You have to know the rules of a tabletop game in order to play it. Like, Unlimited Saga is not packed full of tutorials and easy to understand mechanics, because Unlimited Saga expects you to engage with it, to fumble and to learn it, then come back again with that knowledge and approach it again and again and again until you know the rules enough to play it right. And like, that element of discovery is an integral part of the game, and especially its combat engine, which makes it one of the most unique games ever made. Also, one of the most visually stunning games ever made, but that's a discussion for a different time.
And a fantastic soundtrack as well.
Yes,
but we'll talk about that another time as well.
I owned the soundtrack for Unlimited Saga before I owned the game. I've had the soundtrack for that game. The official, like, SquareSoft printed, like, was like $80. Like, it's one of the best soundtracks ever made, and quite possibly, if not my favorite, then one of my top 5 battle sequence music tracks of all time. I had one more game listed that I thought was interesting and worth discussing, and it kind of ties back into what we were talking about with the combo systems, because this game also featured a combo system. But Chrono Cross has one of my favorite battle systems. So Chrono Cross had a very similar kind of dynamic to some of the other games we've talked about today, where your attack sequence consists of building a number of abilities out of a list that you pick from, and then you execute a couple moves in a turn. Now, spoiler alert for a 20-year-old game, cover your ears, but what's amazing about Chrono Cross is the way in which its combat system also ties into its narrative, but it's something you don't discover until the final boss.
Right.
So in Chrono Cross, you every attack you choose in your combo also has an elemental affinity, which is color-coded. Now, I never noticed this. Maybe you did because you're a music guy. I don't know how other people's brains work. But every color is also tied to a note.
Right.
And when you execute those attacks, it plays those tones.
Right.
And I never noticed that. So, like, the final boss of the game, this is interesting because they never expect you to engage with this for the entirety of the game, only for the final boss. But you can defeat the final boss, like, take all her health down, and you get the bad ending. But in order to get the good ending, you can't kill her, you have to play her lullaby for her.
Oh, no.
Like, you can't kill her. You have to have all 3 of your characters geared up with the right moves and execute them in the right sequence without being interrupted to play her lullaby for her.
Oh, that's amazing.
And as a kid, that blew my goddamn mind. because you get there and you're like, I've been playing this game for 50 hours and I just realized that I can use the combat system to play music. And like, I can't think of a single game that's ever blown the top of my head wide open like that. Like in its twilight hours, completely flipped my entire understanding of everything I had engaged with prior to that. Like, truly an amazing feat from a design perspective.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So that's the last one I've got. There's tons more, I'm sure, out there, and we can always do one of these episodes again, because I'm sure
we'll be back on this subject definitely.
I'm sure I'll think of more, like as soon as we're done recording.
But yes, there are many more RPGs to talk about, many more elements of RPGs to talk about as well. So we will definitely revisit this at some point in the future. Okay, so let's wrap up then. So, would you like to tell everyone where to find you online, as usual?
Yes, so everyone can check out my my website, mrgilderpixels.com, and Tumblr, Twitter, and Instagram at mrgilderpixels. I am currently varnishing my largest pixel painting ever as we speak. It's drying in the garage, so I should be posting that in the next couple days, probably by the end of the week, so please keep an eye out. I'm very excited about it.
Excellent. And you can find me on MoeGamer.net, where you'll find my cover game articles. Like I say, at the time of recording, I'm currently covering Death End Requests by Compile Heart, Idea Factory. You can also find my YouTube channel, which you may well be watching this podcast on. If you're listening on SoundCloud, there'll be a link to the YouTube channel in the audio description. If you're on YouTube, there may well be a link to the SoundCloud on the video description.
How convenient.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, just wanted to give myself a shout out because I've put a book out now as well, which collects together all of the cover game features from MoeGamer.net in 2016 in lovely text-based formats. So if you would like a hard copy of the stuff I've written rather than reading it online, then that is now available. I'll pop a link down there in the description as well, or pop by MoeGamer.net and there's a link in the sidebar for that as well. I'll be making some more of those during my couple of weeks off as well, so watch out for those. All right, as always then, thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. Be sure to check out MoeGamer.net for new articles on Japanese and Japanese-inspired video games, new and old, every weekday. Every month, MoeGamer features an in-depth exploration of an individual game or series as its cover game, so be sure to check the archives to see if your favourite has had a deep dive yet. If you'd like to support the site directly, please consider becoming a patron or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.